Welcome back. There is a live look outside from the Oregon coast. Something spooky is happening on this view from our In It Spanish High Resort Hotel camera, which segues perfectly into our next segment. Thanks for watching Afternoon Live. Okay, fear is an emotion that we all experience. So why does feeling afraid make some people feel exhilarated while others panic? Here to explain the science behind fear, we welcome back neuroscientist Dr. Nicole Tetreault. So good to see you.
So great to see you, and that was a spooky camera.
Kind of fun. Okay, we've set the tone. So there you go. So let's
over from Halloween.
There we go. It's happening. Let's talk about fear is something that we all experience, but there's a lot going on under the surface in our minds and our bodies when that's happening.
Yeah, so all of us experience fear. It's one of the core 8 emotions, but actually 30 emotions that we experience. And when we have fear, we naturally go into very known states like fight, flight, freeze, and flop. And so our brains respond to the fear in very different ways depending on who we are.
And different parts of the brain are doing different things, right?
That's right. So when we first experience fear, we kind of hit in the amygdala, and that's where the primary emotion connects to our hippocampus, where we have the memory of how fear happens. And then it goes to our frontal cortex right here, where we're able to basically discern whether or not within 6 seconds, if something is of, grave fear, or if it's something that we can be safe from.
So I think a lot of us can sort of understand or are more familiar with the fight, flight, and freeze. Can you explain more about the flop or the fawn? That's kind of a newer term, I think.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate, fight and flight are your core ways where you get that adrenaline and cortisol out when you get that exact fear. And then when you kind of go into the freezing, we stop. The flop is where our body and you'll see like maybe a squirrel on the side of the road where it pretends like it's dead. That's flopping, where there's this decrease in heart rate and it's almost pretending it's dead, because to a predator, you're not attractive if you're dead. And then the fawning is another experience where basically the prey tries to appease the predator.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about this idea of people who like being afraid, those of us who love a scary movie, things like that? I mean, I can't watch a scary commercial. I have to turn it off immediately. What is that difference in so many people?
Yeah, so that's our different presets. So some people like to be scared, and it's linked to their reward system. So you think about the adrenaline and cortisol shot that people get, it's linked to dopamine, and that becomes a very rewarding experience. For other people, they kind of have a higher sensitivity, they have different brain wiring, and that fear activation actually can create intrusive thoughts. It can have their imagination going. It can really interfere with their sleep. And so it is really different people's presets of their processing with fear.
Can some of that connect back to childhood experiences, things that have kind of wired us a certain way from very early on in life?
Yeah, from our childhood, that definitely can occur because we learn patterns of fear. I had a brother who used to like to dunk me underwater, and I would worry for my life. And then I learned to scuba dive. So it kind of like went over that fear. And so I think that our childhood experiences, also our genetics, plays a role into it, because we know scientifically, for example, trauma carries over from generation to generation. And so even presets of certain things can cause us to have a fear response, and we're not even aware of it because it's in our DNA.
So what about living in a constant state of fear? If you're always worried about something that seems like a very real threat, that can have really negative impacts on our brains and our bodies, right?
You're absolutely right, because for our brains and our bodies, we get wired where the adrenaline and the cortisol is really leading us to have higher rates of stress. And that stress response kind of creates a global inflammation that happens all throughout our body, and it affects every single organ. So it affects your gut, it affects your stomach. That's why people get headaches, they get brain fog, they get stomach aches, they may not want to eat. You can have disruption in your sleep and having kind of overwhelm And then the intrusive thoughts can really kind of wreak havoc with relationships with other people, because you could become more untrustworthy, more paranoid, and you become kind of more isolated over time.
So, what about finding a balance? Because I think a lot of us probably have a decent number of things in this world that we realistically fear, but not living in that state all the time and having all those negative impacts. How do you kind of reconcile and find that happy medium where you can acknowledge that things are scary, but we're not going to have that dominate our entire life?
Yeah. So that's really, it comes back to the discernment and the awareness of kind of what you're saying is really important. Like, we live in a world right now where there's a lot of fear. I mean, your show is really positive, but when we hear the world news of what's going on, it's in the ether of that activation of fear. And so really, I think the awareness is figuring out ways to calm your nervous system down, to know that you are safe, and to really identify the perceived threats and the real threats. Much of the time, 95% of things that we think that are fearful are actually not. And so it's really being able to kind of rewire our minds and find ways to calm our nervous system through, going outside, taking a walk, taking deep breaths, kind of even wiring your mind where you can look at more positive images rather than fearful images, and kind of change your content, is a really big thing. Sometimes you need to change relationships with people if they're, causing a lot of fear in your life, and you need to kind of back from that. So it's really coming back into the awareness of what's good for you.
Yeah, sometimes a pause and a deep breath is all it takes, and you can come back to reality and take on the world in a better place. Hey, thank you so much. It was so great to see you.
Oh, so great to see you.
We'll have more
Thank
information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Live right after this.